How are you? How do you feel about the world these days? I think most of us would say that things are going badly wrong. There's a sense that, the world is off the rails, that things have gone crazy, that the world is on fire. So I call this the age of ruin. And what I want to do in this video is kind of talk a little bit about whether this is real or not, right? So if you Google this world on fire, world in chaos thing, you get, huge amounts of results. So clearly a lot of people are feeling this way. So the question is this real, or is this just we're kind of overreacting to the state of the world? So my job, I have a weird job, right? I'm this kind of like big ideas guy, economist, top 50 thinkers, blah, 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 blah. And part of my job is to look at kind of the vital signs of the world, of civilization, how we're doing at the biggest scale. And what jumps out at me when I look at these indicators is that we're seeing things that we've never seen before, and we shouldn't be seeing. Things that are like serious, 9-alarm fires in my world, in my field of work. So scholars have begun to call this age a polycrisis, okay? And I'll throw up for you a quick kind of definition of that. And what they mean is there's an intersecting set of crises that seem to be afflicting us, hitting us all at once. And this is something new, at least for our civilization. If you want to call it, industrial civilization, post-industrial civilization, whatever you want. It doesn't matter what the name is. So when I look at, and I think that description, polycrisis, is scarily accurate. That's where we are. And if anything, that understates the reality of the situation. So if you're wondering, am I just feeling like this, or is this actually real? I'm here to tell you it's very, very real, and, it's worse than you think. And the reason that I think it's important for us to discuss this is that, excuse me, the reason that I think it's important for us to discuss this is that media does a really bad job of doing exactly that, discussing it. They fail at discussing it. So they might pick one element of a particular crisis at a given time, right? So how's the economy doing, climate change, whatever. But very rarely will you see media coverage of the macro picture, right? This idea of polycrisis, or the real state of the world, or what I'm about to talk to you shortly. And I think that's a real shortcoming, because obviously this is the biggest issue in the world, right? Like that the world is on fire, that things are complete chaos, that it's madness out there. So we need to talk about it, and we need to be conversant with it. And the way that we become conversant with it is just to establish some of the facts. So I said, when I look at the world in my kind of, through my big nerdy here economist glasses, what do I see? And I said that I see things that we've never seen before and things that we shouldn't see. So what are some of those things? Those things are really macro trends, macro forces. So one of those is that democracy is now in steep decline around the globe. So we used to kind of live in a world, or at least under an intellectual paradigm, that said democracy should evolve and grow pretty steadily. And at some point, it may not have been tomorrow, but at some point, the world would be democratic. And over the last decade, we've seen something really disturbing, alarming, and shocking begin to happen, which is that democracy has gone into steep decline. That's something that we never expected to see, and we shouldn't be seeing, right? That's a profound indicator of ill health. So if I was a doctor and civilization was a patient on the table, I would say that, it's kind of like one of its vital organs is failing. Maybe its blood is failing, right? It's that big, it's that important. And that rate of decline is really steep and really shocking. So I've calculated it at somewhere between 5 and 10% a decade. And that's a huge rate of collapse. That's not good. So what's another one of these things that we see that we shouldn't be seeing? Well, I guess you could put climate change on that list, obviously, right? So not so long ago, the expectation was that the mega-scale impacts of climate change would arrive in 2050. They started arriving over the last couple of years. The last couple of summers have been surreal, devastating, tremendously scary, if you, and climate scientists are kind of sounding the alarm as loud as they can about it and saying, hey man, things are really going off the rails and we're seeing these impacts arrive faster and they're much, much more severe than we thought we should be, are different elements of the planetary system kind of moving to different phase states. So again, things that we, in that case, maybe it's not that we never expected to see, but that are happening much faster and are much more severe than we once thought. So another example of that is the economy. And, this is the one that obviously I think concerns me the most. We are now in for a lost decade, but that's not the bad news. Lost decade means that the economy is predicted to stagnate for the next 10 years. And even if there's nominal growth in some countries, like in America, it's kind of an illusion, right? So in America, we see some kind of, 4% growth rate. Maybe it'll get revised down probably to 3%. But the truth, the lived experience is that, we just talked about this in another video, 70% of people are financially traumatized. So this is empty growth, phantom growth, right? What's really happening is that all those gains are accruing to the richest, it used to be the 1%, now it's the 0.01%. And the average person is just getting destroyed out there, just getting hammered. So a lost decade. And I said that's not the bad news. So what is the bad news? The bad news is that we don't have a source of renewed growth or prosperity on the horizon. Our economic paradigm is tapped out. How have we grown over the last 200 years? Well, first there was empires and, to put it bluntly to you, unfortunately, slave labor. Then we had kind of, industrialization, and then we had globalization. And all of those things are now tapped out. And that's why you see certain elements of, the business world going gaga for things like AI. They see it as a cheap, easy source of growth. The truth is that those things are not going to be lasting sources of healthy growth, good growth, real growth. It's very obvious to see what will happen with AI, for example. Yes, businesses may adopt it. It will cost a lot of jobs. So again, we come back to the same problem of phantom growth. So those are some examples of things that are going wrong in big ways that we either never expected to see going wrong or we shouldn't see going wrong, this systemically. And certainly we should not be seeing so much go so wrong all at once. That is a sign that we are really in, this kind of thing of polycrisis, this state that is new in a sense. A polycrisis, it's easy to dismiss it, but I don't think that we should, because outside of, war or natural calamity or some kind of, force majeure or some kind of unforeseen act, we should not see so many things going so wrong at once. So many things, economics, politics, society, democracy, and all of those have an impact on people's lives too, right? So I've recently started discussing what I call the most important chart of the 21st century. I'll throw it up for you here again so you can see it again. You see negative affect exploding. Bad feelings, negative emotions, basically unhappiness, stress, distress, anxiety, despair, while the elements of happiness have flatlined or are falling. And so what that tells us is that there's yet another crisis, a crisis of well-being, because all of this stuff is really beginning to take its toll on people. And that's not just like a soft, airy-fairy thing, right? The point of all this stuff, the economy, society, politics, democracy, technology, is well-being. If the only point is to make a tiny number of people rich, then we're back in like the feudal age, right? So, and that's what Yanis Varoufakis would say, that he wrote about in his new book. So people are beginning to recognize this, right? So Yanis has talked about it a little bit. Gordon Brown, Britain's former prime minister, has teamed up with one of the world's best economists, Mohamed El-Arian. They've written a new book called Permacrisis. Now Ferguson, the historian, has written a book, I think it's called Doom. So this stuff is real. And some of the world's brighter minds are now beginning to recognize that, yeah, things are going wrong, not just in a small way. These aren't kind of temporary anomalies or hiccups. It's not a recession. It's not a downturn. It's not that people are feeling a little bit bad. It's not that, there's some small hiccup in democratic progress. It's that we have major systemic long-run crises affecting all of these forces at once. And they appear to be phase changes, shifts, long-run reversals. They don't appear to be, temporary slowdowns. So that's a big deal. That's a really big deal. In a future video, we're gonna discuss how that's a turning point in human history. But for now, the point of this is to understand that, yeah, this is real. If it feels like an age of ruin, that's because it is. And of course, my message isn't that I'm not trying to scare you. I'm not trying to sensationalize. I'm not trying to doommonger, any of this stuff. What that means is that we need to get real about fixing some of this stuff. We need to work harder. We need to work faster. We need paradigm shifts. We need renewed investment. We need real leadership. We need transformation. We need breakthroughs. And until we really kind of redesign our systems and our lives for that level of human potential, the age of ruin is likely to continue. Because that's what's really at the heart of it, right? Human possibility itself is being stifled by broken systems and paradigms. We'll discuss that more. That's a lot for now to take in. I'm really sorry if I made you cry. That's not the point, but I do want everybody to be conversant with the facts about what is at stake today. It is that big. Thank you for listening. I'll talk to you soon. Bye.